It's that week, everybody. It's NFL Draft Week. We never thought it would get here. 2024 NFL Draft, New York Giants, sixth overall selection. And we are here to preview that and everything regarding the Giants and the NFL right here on Talkin Ball Live with Pat Leonard. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here. I hope you're as excited as I am. You know, the juices are flowing, the trade conversations are happening behind the scenes. Teams laying the groundwork. Who's going to move up? Who's going to move back? What's the first round going to look like? And then how is that going to set the table for the rest of the draft, the rest of the weekend, and the 2024 NFL season? Really excited to talk to you guys about it tonight. Really love these conversations we have Mondays and Thursdays and setting the table for what proves to be a draft with a lot of hype. And I think it's going to live up to it, just because there are not only teams with multiple first-round picks in this draft, including the Chicago Bears, Arizona Cardinals, but also the amount of quarterbacks and how that's going to dictate the board. Going to tell you guys about a sponsor real quick, and we'll get right to your questions. Remember, you can pay for a super chat or super sticker, and that will elevate your comment or question to the top of the queue, and I will address or answer it immediately. And if not, please hit that like button or subscribe to the channel, or both. We're PL on NFL here on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and P Leonard NYDN on Twitter/X, and of course the New York Daily News website and the Believe Network. All right, BetOnline is your number one source for all your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, NBA, and NHL playoff stats. All the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Bet online where the game starts. Jacob says, smash that like and sub button for Pat. Appreciate you kicking us off that way. It's Christmas week, Pat, says Jacob. I echo that, Jacob. All right, we got Chris checking in with $4.99, a $5 super chat. Really appreciate that support, Chris. Chris says, my fear with J.J. McCarthy is he's just a game manager, not able to put a team on his back, and should really look for that in the top 6 pick. So you're saying that even if you like J.J. McCarthy, you don't see him as a 6th overall pick. You're not the only one, Chris. There are people who feel that way in the NFL. There are others who believe that he is worthy of a top 5 selection in this NFL draft. The reason he could make sense for the Giants potentially is because they're a team that's looking to go that Green Bay model, possibly, of letting a quarterback sit and watch and develop and take over when he's ready. That's something that appeals to Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll. And the reason why, in addition to their current quarterback situation, they are so eager about scouting this quarterback class so aggressively. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that even though they like J.J. McCarthy, that they're taking him at 4 in a trade up. We don't know that for sure. We know they like Drake May. We know they like J.J. McCarthy. But which quarterback's going to be available? Which one do they like enough to mortgage picks and future picks for that player versus a player they like, but they don't want to sell the farm to get? Those are the details we're trying to parse here and there. Do we think that Drake May could be the sell the farm guy and J.J. McCarthy might be a guy they like a little later, or just at the value of 6? Possibly. But only Joe Schoen knows for sure how he's going to operate when he's on the clock, especially because even though we believe that we know what the top 2, maybe top 3 picks are going to look like, some of these teams are still keeping us guessing. And that's why I really can't wait just for it to be Thursday night at 8 p.m. You know, Thursday night when Roger Goodell takes the stage. And of course, we all know Caleb Williams is going to the Bears at number 1, but really eager to get that out of the way and get going, because we're almost at the point now where the more you hear, the more it just clogs your brain and gets in the way of just kind of streamlining your ideas and consciousness of where this draft is actually headed, because it really does involve a lot of big names, a lot of big pieces, some great position players, but also a lot of quarterbacks that can gum up the top of the board and make it that much more challenging for people to project how it's going to fall. But we're going to talk a little bit today about the mock draft that I compiled with my colleague at the Daily News, Antoine Staley. Of course, we both cover the NFL. I'm on Giants as well. He's on Jets as well. And so we ended up, he did the even picks and including the Giants at 6. And I picked the odd number teams, and I also picked for the Jets at 10. So I'll get into that mock draft a little bit as we go and explain our thinking and reasoning. And we can kind of use that as a jumping off point. And actually, since Chris just mentioned it, let's just go to it right now. Here is how the mock draft progressed, and we will do the top 10 at the moment just to give you an idea of this is just one scenario of how we saw it possibly shaking out. And we didn't make any trades, but we did ID in the New York Daily News. Here's a team that might trade back here, but if they select, here's the player, right? So I took Caleb Williams for the Bears at number 1. The Washington Commanders took Jaden Daniels at 2. That was Antoine's pick. I gave the Patriots Drake May at 3. Now, we don't know that would be Drake May for sure. Elliot Wolf, the general manager, says that he's listening to calls, and obviously that's a potential trade up spot for teams like the Giants, the Minnesota Vikings. Even the Denver Broncos, even with this Zach Wilson trade, seem to be a team that's lurking, but obviously they don't have as much ammo to go up. So that's why they're not as heavily in that conversation as a team like the Vikings, and then the Giants in closer striking distance at 6. But, could that be J.J. McCarthy at 3? Could it be Drake May? Could it just be a Marvin Harrison Jr.? Or will the Patriots try to do what the Arizona Cardinals did last year in trading back and then back up for a player? Will the Patriots be a team that tries to accrue a ton of assets and then moves back up and tries to get a guy like J.J. McCarthy in a trade back up the board? But I give them Drake May. And then in our board, it went Cardinals, Marvin Harrison Jr., and the LA Chargers, obviously a team that some people think are going to go offensive lineman at 5. I gave them Malik Neighbors in the mock draft at 6, the LSU wide receiver. Now, Harrison, Neighbors, both interesting players that, hey, do they fall to 6? Do the Giants end up with an elite receiver in their lap? Who knows? But it'd be fascinating to see. But in this scenario, I give the Chargers Neighbors. Frankly, I'll just tell you right now, I think the Chargers would love to trade back. Joe Ortiz, new GM, comes from Baltimore. This is a program, a general manager who has been schooled in the art of finding value and drafting for value and accruing more picks and getting more kicks at the can. Like, that's essentially the MO of the Baltimore Ravens and their draft philosophy. And so if you think about it that way, like, this is why, a trade up for the Giants, it might not be all the way to 3 if they're going to get a quarterback. If a guy falls to 5 even, maybe that's this position where the Chargers are really eager to move back. Chargers, Cardinals, all those teams ahead of the Giants are teams to watch. But so in our scenario, after I give the Chargers Neighbors, the Giants get J.J. McCarthy, quarterback from Michigan, courtesy of Antoine Staley making that pick. And then the Titans take Joe Alt. The Falcons take Dallas Turner. The Chicago Bears, I gave them Laiatu Latu, the edge from UCLA, a guy with some injury concerns, but an elite talent who really is one of the premier players in this draft if he stays healthy. And then I gave the Jets Talis Fuaga, an offensive tackle from Oregon State, a guy who people I trust think is going to go in the top 10. And maybe even the Chargers in their trade back end up taking him rather than taking Alt at their spot. So that's a player to watch for the Chargers, Talis Fuaga. I caught a little bit of heat on Twitter from some Jets fans that I took the offensive tackle with Brock Bowers and Rome Odunze still on my board in the mock. So you guys can tell me what you think about that. But to me, you have some weapons with the Jets. Yes, you could add some more, but this is a deep receiver draft. You got to protect Aaron Rodgers, who I don't think is as mobile as he used to be. And if he gets hurt, the whole program goes up in flames, as we've already seen. Tuto checks in. Massive salutes and respects to King of New York Sports, Big Pat. Tuto, really appreciate you, man, for saying that. And all diehard Giants fans across the pond, please slap all stinky boys losers out here, including Saquon losers and the birds. Yeah, that's right. Here he comes, Tuto, with the trash talk again. And listen, I appreciate you guys being here. I know it's Sixers-Knicks tonight. I know there's a lot going on. But, what a week this is going to be. The buildup is going to be insane. And then Thursday night's going to be fascinating. I'm thinking what I'm going to do for Thursday is do a pre-draft live in the afternoon And before I head to the Giants facility, maybe in the early afternoon or maybe at lunchtime, we'll do a live, but shorter than usual, probably maybe like 30 minutes to an hour, to prime the pump for what's coming. And certainly by that time, maybe we have had a trade by then in the first round. I'll probably be hearing more things closer to the draft, as typically happens as we get closer to that time. More starts to come out, or you get a better feeling for the way things are going to go. And so the way I feel like the best way to handle this, for us to have that conversation and to drive it and to enjoy the buildup, is to get together maybe in the early afternoon, lunchtime here on YouTube, on the YouTube channel, PL on NFL, for a live. And then at night, I'll be on social media. I'll be on X, P Leonard, NYDN. You can follow me there. And then once the Giants pick and we get that info from talking to Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll in the Giants auditorium, right after they make the pick or after the first round's over, they come downstairs. We talk to them face to face about what they saw, why they made those picks. And then after that happens, we'll find a way to get back on directly with you guys live. And if it's too late by that time, maybe we'll just run it back early the next morning. But I promise you that we'll have live content here for you before the draft in the first round and after the first round, to dive in deep and to make sure that you guys can come to this landing page, our YouTube page, the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard YouTube page, and use this as your trusted source of information and analysis of what you see from your favorite team and from these teams around the league. Jacob says, not sure if you saw Ross Tucker's tweet. Breaking, just found out there's a team open to trading down, yet looking to trade up, but don't be surprised if they just stand pat and make a pick. This sounds like the Giants. Thoughts? I'm starting to think May is the guy. Do you feel the same? Is Penix going 8 at smokescreen? Is that a smokescreen? I can't imagine the Falcons drafting a QB this high after the Cousins deal. Yeah, I mean, the Falcons are a team that surely can address some needs and become a better all-around roster, rather than just taking a quarterback behind Kirk Cousins, who they just paid a premium sum. I will say yes, Falcons and Michael Penix Jr., that stretches the imagination. But I would say two things. One, like I told you guys last time we were on here, Penix in the first half of the first round, like that's where I'm buying. Penix in the first half of the first round. Is it the Raiders? Is it somebody else? We'll see. I also view noise like that about Michael Penix Jr. as an effort possibly to attract buyers. So the Raiders are there at 13. A team that is coveting Michael Penix Jr. behind that 7, 8, 9, 10 area, that is an area to watch. We talked to Adam Schefter on the podcast. He mentioned specifically, even when it came to J.J. McCarthy, that Adam felt like J.J. McCarthy would maybe get drafted in that area, like the not 8 or 9 in a trade up, let's say from the Minnesota Vikings or the Denver Broncos or one of those teams. So that is an area everyone's focused on 3, 4, 5, but I think we need to look at 8 and 9 there as well, because really not as many trades typically happen as we discuss and as kind of get bandied about and floated pre-draft. Once teams get on the clock, usually there's not as much action as you expect or as you heard there could be. But in this draft, if no action occurs or if little action occurs, it's not going to be because the conversations weren't happening. Like, these teams really are jockeying for position. And the part of the reason is, Jacob, the quarterbacks and the way that the top of the draft falls, until draft night, these teams won't know for sure which of their coveted players are still on the board or which of their coveted quarterbacks are still there to go get. So conversations about, is a deal in place, or what are the parameters of the deal, or does this team know we're looking to possibly come up? Those conversations are happening to lay the groundwork. But not until draft night are we getting to a point where teams know for sure which direction they're going to go. And so, like you asked about Joe Schoen, he did leave every single option open. He's talking about how great it would be to land a great player at 6, no matter what, there's going to be a great player there. And then he doesn't deny that they're looking into calling teams ahead of them, looking for possible trades up. And then he says, well, look at all these teams calling us about a possible trade back, which is essentially him telling other teams, if you haven't called yet about possibly trading up to our pick, give us a call. So he's making an overture to people saying, we might trade back too. And what does that do? That essentially puts Joe Schoen in a position where he lays groundwork to move however he needs to off of the action he sees in front of him. And that's due diligence. Mix Sports says, bro, please just share what you are hearing at first, and then others can ask questions later after. A sip of the Cabernet. Salute to you, Mix Sports. Getting right to the point. I appreciate you. Yeah, Mix, good point. And I would say usually when I do these, I try to come in with some sort of opener. If I have breaking news, I'll lead with that. Today, I decided to lead with the mock draft as a way of kind of demonstrating to you guys one way that I see it along with my colleague, Antoine. Here's how I see it, Mix. This is my opinion. I think that the Giants want to get a quarterback and are trying to get a quarterback. I think it's still possible they don't draft one at number 6 or in that top of the first round. But I think if they don't, it will not be because they didn't try. I think it will just be because in the end, it didn't happen because another team was more aggressive with a package or based on just how teams selected ahead of them, right? Because you're not going to love every quarterback. Like, for example, I don't think the Giants would select Jaden Daniels, but I do think they would select Drake May. Caleb Williams is not going to get to them, but I do think they would select J.J. McCarthy. Do I know where they would select J.J. McCarthy and where they wouldn't? My gut tells me that here's how I would put it. I've heard information that they would like J.J. McCarthy, but not necessarily all the way up at the top of the draft. I've also heard that they love J.J. McCarthy, and there are people who believe that if he was there at 6, the Giants would take him. Now, the Giants taking and liking a quarterback and trading assets up for that quarterback are two different things given the price of what those trades could mean, Mix. And so I know you want me to tell you exactly what's going to happen right now, but all I can do is paint you the picture of all the information I have and the way it forms how I see it right now. But teams, especially the Giants right now, after let's just put it this way. They are extremely sensitive to leaks. And so the Giants are battening down the hatches, and the NFL is asking teams at the top of the draft and making sure that these teams at the top of the draft are not giving away anything because they want it happening live in our face on draft night. And so that's why, even though a lot of us have breadcrumbs or some of us have a little bit more than that, we don't know for sure how it's going to fall. Now, one guy I was digging into a little bit more, Mix, recently, and actually that brings us to Joel. He says, with the 6th pick in the 2024 NFL draft, the New York Giants select Malik Neighbors, wide receiver, LSU. I think that's certainly a possibility. I am skeptical. Now, this is why, Joel and Mix, this is why the draft is so difficult this year. Malik Neighbors is a great example why. Let's throw Harrison in this as well, okay? These are two guys who in any other draft would be top 3 picks, wouldn't be a question, okay? Now, does that mean that they're going to be top 3 picks or top 4 picks, both of them, in this draft, despite all the quarterback frenzy? I think that's a possibility. I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen, but I think that's a possibility. Because it's just really hard for me, like Neighbors, like talking to people around the league about how many people have Neighbors ranked ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr. Like I was talking to one coach the other day who essentially said, like, if you took Harrison's name off the back of his jersey and you didn't know he was Marvin Harrison's son, that Neighbors would be closer to a consensus, the number 1 in a lot of people's eyes than Harrison in his mind. And he wasn't saying that Harrison's not a great player. He was just saying that there's that little bump maybe that a guy is getting reputation wise that if you compare those two players and you just said apples to apples, who would you like as a player, that Neighbors would be a lot of people's choice. And he already is. There's some off-field stuff to talk about there, but, explosive player, elite talent. Was making some calls today around on Marvin Harrison Jr. Had some interesting experiences with that. Not an easy family to get a hold of, as I guess I would put it, and didn't have exactly a pleasant experience while I was working to get in touch. But we'll see if we can continue to do that leading up to the draft. But maybe there's a prospect like Marvin Harrison Jr., who I was talking to somebody else the other day, like Arizona Cardinals. Yes, Monty Ossenfort traded back and back up last year. And we all saw that video came out today. Our friend of the podcast, Adam Schefter, put that out of Ossenfort working the phones really calmly and collected and all that. But for all of those overtures and fielding calls at number 4, there's this thought of, like one coach told me, I think they want their next Larry Fitzgerald. I think they see the next Larry Fitzgerald in this guy, clean cut prospect, 10 years, top receiver, number 1. You slot him in and he starts for you. You don't have to worry about him. He's clean. He's an elite player, right? All those things you see, the next Larry Fitz. That makes sense to me. But I guess my point, Joel, is that, yes, maybe Neighbors ends up being the Giants pick and quarterbacks bump him down to him and that kind of thing. But there's just something in my mind that says, like, usually guys who are number 1 players at a position on everyone's board don't last till 6, like at a position like that in the modern NFL. Obviously, someone's going to last at these different positions, number 1 overall at their collective spots. But I know the board doesn't look like he is definitely going to go ahead of them, but he's just too highly rated to think that he's definitely going to be there. We'll see. Jacob says, it's draft week. When it's draft week, NBA playoffs time, when you got the Knicks on the TV and Pat Leonard on your laptop. That's right. Doug says, I'm sure it's New England, but I'm even more positive that it's BS. Okay. Rodrigo says, after everything I've seen and heard from people who have actually watched J.J. McCarthy play, I feel like he's the best QB in this draft. I feel like Caleb will be a bust. Interesting. Well, part of the deal is that Caleb has such high-level traits. And, he really is an elite talent who maybe needs to be refined in certain areas, but has kind of talent and arm and making ability that is rare. And people do see Mahomes-like qualities in him. And so that's obviously scary, impressive. I personally I've said this before, and obviously it might mean nothing, but Caleb being a different guy, and wondering about how will he respond in a big market and when the adversity hits in the NFL and when he takes the kind of criticism that even at USC he hasn't been used to. That's always been something to research, but obviously people around him say he's a great guy, great teammate, and somebody who, he is a different prospect and a different person and a different number 1 overall guy coming in, but that he will give everything to the Chicago Bears and be that face of the franchise that they're looking for. J.J. McCarthy, Rodrigo, that's a really interesting comment by you. I think the thing about JJ, it's all the intangibles and the upside along with the talent he has, right? So with him, you're looking at what is untapped and what I see as an evaluator that makes him not only a player that, let's say, I can grade a certain level, but I can justify a high enough pick because even though certain throws aren't there on tape in college, I've worked him out. I've spent all this time with him, and I know in the end how comfortable I am with him. I'll just say this. The amount of homework the Giants have done on Drake May and J.J. McCarthy and the visits they had, bringing them into the building, and obviously we told you on here that Michael Penix Jr., even though they spent a lot of time with him in Washington, he didn't end up making a top 32, the Giants. I just think my eyes are on May and McCarthy right now, for the Giants if it's a quarterback. Daniels has a shot. If he bulks up, he tends to run without surveying the field, as does May. Rodrigo says with Caleb, it's about character. Don't care if he paints his nails or what, but him jumping into the stands to cry in his mother's arms, feel like he needs to be tougher than that and accept losing. It's, you know what, Rodrigo? I wouldn't sit here and say he's not tough because he did that, but it certainly made me have questions about what the makeup is there to lead the player to do that, and wondering how that type of behavior would be received in a market like Chicago. I think that's fair. Let's see. All right. I love that you guys are kind of having discussion within the discussion as we do our chat here. Rodrigo, Jacob, and Doug bouncing back and forth. Doug says Penix is not going to Atlanta. That's more BS being tossed out by GMs and agents for the Shefties of the world to report so they can get an actual scoop down the line. Well, like I said, too, that's an area that I think teams are aware could be trade up material, and you could end up sliding back just a couple spots if you're Atlanta and picking up extra capital and still getting the player you're looking for if a quarterback's there. So you're just kind of laying the groundwork for that. Rodrigo says the Chargers are the enigma. I assume Arizona trades out. QBs go 1, 2, 3, 4. Chargers will have the pick of the litter with MHJ, Neighbors, and all sitting there. Yeah, you know what? I'm not convinced quarterbacks are going 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not. I think it's possible. I think Minnesota obviously is a team everybody's watching. And because people are watching them, and because the Patriots look like in the end a team that could just go QB and they need a QB, then it's certainly possible that those top 4 picks are QBs. It's just really interesting to me, given the circumstances of some of these elite talents that are on the board, especially those receivers. At what point does, hey, yeah, we like these quarterbacks, but some of these teams, everybody can use players like Joe Alt, Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr., right? Rodrigo says he would definitely swap with the Chargers if he was the Giants to take Marvin Harrison Jr. Michael, what's going on? Good to see you, man. Thanks for being back. Let's see. Hunter says, good evening, Pat. Hopefully we draft one of the stud wide receivers, or if May slips, I want him. I don't want J.J. McCarthy. Definitely seems like that's how the fans are going on the J.J. train, saying that like we like him, but only so much, or that you don't see him as more than what you have in the current quarterback room, and you see more upside in Drake May. I would tell you that teams see upside in both, but I told you guys a couple live chats ago when I got a text earlier that day from a source that I trust saying that May is the guy, that he's the guy that the Giants want at the top of the draft if they can get him. Here's the type of things we don't know. Even though May is a top prospect in this draft, if some of these elite position players end up going at these trade spots everyone feels are going to be quarterback spots, is one of these top quarterbacks going to just slip even slightly, like Drake May at 6, right? If that happens, like to me, Drake May is a New York Giant. Like that's what I think. Now, is that going to happen? You had the Jaden Daniels that does he want to play in Washington? Didn't like the visit with all the other players, right? Dan Quinn's the coach there. So yes, there's a general manager and an owner and an offensive coordinator in play, but is that the type of player and mindset Dan Quinn's looking for, right? I wonder about those types of things. So could that be Drake May instead, right? I think ultimately Jaden Daniels is still the favorite, but we'll see. I really don't think this is as set as people are acting. Doug says the Giants don't need more picks. Oh, the Cardinals don't need more picks. Stay at 4, take the top receiver on your board. There's no need to get cute. I think that's what they end up doing. I agree. Savage Steve, I am feeling great is what I'm feeling. And, I still think, it's either, I guess my best thought is Drake May, one of the top receivers, and JJ McCarthy is the wild card there. I'm not positive if he's a trade up guy, but maybe he's a number 6 guy, or maybe he's a guy they like if he slips a little lower and it's in a trade back type deal, but it's not at 6. They like him. But, May, I think at this moment, I think is more the go up and sell the farm for the guy player at quarterback rather than JJ. But they like both players for sure and people. So, Steve, I wish I had something that I could nail down for you, giving you my best understanding right now. Jacob says over under 1 hour before Pat breaks the trade. Hey, we will see. I'm checking the phone as we're talking, Jacob. I appreciate that. Rodrigo said Dan Orlovsky has stated McCarthy is more NFL ready than May. May has a higher ceiling, but will have to sit a year. Right. So what did the Giants do at quarterback already? They went and got Drew Lock, a veteran, on a 1-year deal with playing time incentives. So they have Daniel Jones coming off injury. They have Drew Lock prepared to possibly play a fair amount of games, whether Jones doesn't get healthier right away, whether Lock outplays him, or is starting to stand out in practice as Jones is struggling, right? But they have nothing in the hopper for after this season, right? They have nobody on the roster at quarterback to say, okay, here's what 2024 looks like, but in 2025, here's who we're passing it off to. They don't have that guy on their team. This is a team, maybe I should have led it with this as strongly as this. This team had Russell Wilson in for an exploratory visit. I mean, this is a Giants team that, and I know Russell Wilson isn't the player now that he used to be, but this is a Giants team that had Russell Wilson in to visit. And, at that moment, I think people need to understand what that indicated and signaled. That signaled that Russell Wilson thought there was a chance that the Giants would sign him to start at quarterback for them, right? Now, obviously, in the end, it turned out that's what he was not going to be guaranteed that. And he went elsewhere to the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? Where it turns out Justin Fields ended up as well, but Russell Wilson starts as the starter. But bringing in a quarterback of that name and that caliber and that recognition, that was a signal with flares out into the sky of the type of moves and names and level of interest the Giants had and needed in the quarterback position. Drew Lock gets added to the quarterback room, but they still are not looking at a quarterback. I mean, maybe it's better than the Broncos room right now, even after that Russell Wilson trade with Wilson, Stidham, and Ben DiNucci. But the Giants are looking at a quarterback room that, to this point about Dan Orlovsky saying that if the Giants hypothetically, let's say they like both players, we know they do. If they agree with that Orlovsky statement, right? And they think McCarthy's more NFL ready, but May in the end is going to be the better player. She's going to take a little bit of time. That's a plan that Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll very well could get behind because they're tied to Daniel Jones this year contractually. But if they get a young guy in the building like that, there's no pressure to play him right away because you brought in Drew Lock, Daniel Jones. Now, I'm not saying you're going to win games. Who knows what's going to happen in the games? And that's a whole nother story, right? You can't afford to just lose games while you're developing your quarterback. But this is another reason why Drake May makes sense for the Giants, is because handing off that baton in that time frame, in an ideal world, if everything else stays steady, that actually makes more sense. So we'll see where they go. Hunter says, can we do either a late Thursday or early-ish Friday pod after the first round? Yeah, Hunter, you probably heard me right at the start. But I think what I'm going to do is an early afternoon Thursday live just to prime the pump here on YouTube. And then going to try to come back in after the first round and go live with you guys on that. So that's going to be the plan. And we'll see how that can go. But I'm looking forward to that. Rodrigo thinks JJ is the dark horse of the draft. MD says, any word on Slayton? Any talks moving him or what's even really going on there? MD, best I understand of Slayton is he's seeking a contract extension. Obviously, the cap going up, reasonable for a player who's led the team in receiving 4 of his 5 years in the league to want some money and to be rewarded. I do think this is kind of the player returning the favor to the front office that squeezed him into an embarrassing pay cut after shopping him when Joe Shane and Brian Dable first arrived in New York. And I think this is Slayton saying, okay, you guys were looking out for you there. And now I'm looking out for me. Right. And I think that that's completely reasonable. I also view it as like, listen, those types of scenarios with Joe Shane at GM, we've seen some contentious negotiations like the James Bradbury and kind of like the mishandling of some of these situations where there just ends up being some bad feelings. Talkin Barkley was another one, during the first long year there of where he held out in the spring and obviously vented that he felt like the Giants were leaking things. And then you have this situation with Slayton where it's a player who just watched Talkin Barkley kind of stand his ground and get his, even if it meant going elsewhere. And now I think this is another player kind of standing his ground. Now, that doesn't mean he's definitely leaving. Obviously, Dexter Lawrence stood his ground, got paid. But Dexter Lawrence is a second-team All-Pro, 2-time Pro Bowler, I believe 2-time Pro Bowler, and one of the best players on the team. Obviously, my take is that Slayton sees the writing on the wall with the Giants expected to add at least one receiver in this draft and continuing to add to their weapons and feeling like I'm either going to get paid or I'm going to get traded. But either way, I'll be in a better position. I'll either make more money and be on the Giants, and that'll be great, or I'll get traded somewhere in a contract year where I'll be on a better offense and hopefully be able to capitalize and make more money. So that's my view. That's my bird's eye view on that. Chronicle says, personally, Pat, I'd rather take Michael Penix Jr. over J.J. McCarthy just because Penix has done more with less over his career. The injuries are in his past, and I liked his letter to the GM. Thought it answered a lot. Yeah, I like Michael Penix Jr. a lot. I mean, every time I see him throw, he's the best thrower on the field. So hard to say anything negative about that. I like him as a player, and I think he will help ignite an offense to whatever team that gets him. Michael says, hey guys, keep seeing those rumors of New England dangling that third pick. We will see. Giants Chronicle says, Pat, is there a new guy working the Daily News Giants beat? I forget which recent presser it was. However, there was another New York Daily News reporter asking questions. I'm still our NFL columnist and our Giants beat writer. Chronicles, thanks for asking. I just took a quick breather there, had a few days off. So Peter Splendorio, who's a very talented young man working at the Daily News right now, was kind enough to fill in for me on that day. Did so admirably, asked some questions, wrote some stories. But no, I'm still the beat writer, but Peter was kind enough to help out. And it's funny, Chronicles, it was long ago now, but the Daily News, just like the Post is still running, the Daily News used to be the kind of place where you had, 2 or 3 people backing you up, helping you out. You took some days off here and there. They jumped in and went to practice for you. You had backup writers, you had sidebar writers, right? I was those people doing sidebars for people, writing 7th sidebars on playoff games. Like that was me. And so it usually was typical back in the day, I guess now at the Daily News, to see somebody other than that main beat writer on that conference call on a Tuesday or a Wednesday or whatever. But in the modern age, and especially for me in like the last, 5 years, or I guess mostly the time I've been on the Giants beat, probably the last 4 years for sure. It's me, right? It's me. If it's not me, it's nobody else. And so it's great to have Peter Splendorio there helping out and, a supportive Daily News team because even if the team is smaller, we do still support each other. But no, still me. No Mets, no Jets. What's going on? Jacob says, appreciate you, all you do, Pat. No other Giants beat writer doing this. I appreciate you, Jacob. Thank you. We're only going to keep growing this too, promise you. And you guys are helping us do that. Rodrigo says, any news on the Eagles Saquon tampering charges by the NFL? Just that there's supposed to be a resolution sooner rather than later. I would expect both that and the Atlanta Falcons, Kirk Cousins situations, those will be, resolved and announced prior to the draft. You would expect at least for those sanctions to come down in that way. Or they'll come down, let's say during the draft, and they'll dock them picks in next year's draft, let's say. That could always happen as well, where they get sanctioned and then a pick gets taken away in 2025, let's say, in a certain round. That can happen as well. But we're definitely in the window now of finding out the results of both the Falcons and the Eagles tampering investigations with Cousins and Barkley. I did see Adam Schefter say that the Falcons are expected to be punished more severely than the Eagles. Will that be a first-round pick? We'll see. Let's see. Tuto says, we're all watching the Knicks match. That's right. The whole time I wanted to trade back for capital, Thaw says, I've changed my mind. We need a QB. Thawstead, I agree with you. And, I talked to somebody the other day, and we're talking about some other things, and then the Giants come up. And this person says, they have to go QB. Just like that. Just, they have to go quarterback. How could they not, right? And now that doesn't mean they're definitely going to. But, there are people in the NFL who forget for a second how strongly the Giants and how diligently the Giants have studied these quarterbacks and pursued these quarterbacks. But just people looking at their roster and saying, how could they not? How could they go into their season like this, right? And I think anybody who doesn't think they're going quarterback is ignoring everything they've done, over the course of the last 3 months. Obviously, because they're at 6 and they won some of those games late in the year, courtesy of Wink Martindale's defense, they're in a position now where they're not in the catbird seat, so to speak, just able to select their quarterback at 2 or 3 or whatever it is. But they've been doing too much aggressive work on these quarterbacks. Let's see. Starboy agrees, QB or bust. Let's see. Doug says, if we draft a QB, what changes? The new guy still wouldn't have any weapons on offense. Well, Doug, here's another thing. We talk about this a lot on our chat. If you're a fan who thinks, listen, don't blow this up, even if this season is still a frustrating one and the losses pile up, give it time. Don't pull the plug. We can't keep doing that, right, Doug? If that's how you feel, though, then you can live with, let's tread water while developing a quarterback we feel like is elite, but just needs a little time, right? Now, not that you're throwing in the towel on the season. You're still drafting a player you think is going to be great, but you're drafting that in the sense that you're viewing it as a longer-term thing, right? Let's see. Rodrigo, thank you for checking in with the $5 super chat. He says, will the Giants get docked picks from the Eagles? No, typically what happens is the pick just gets essentially removed from the round. Or you can be awarded. So let's go over a couple of examples that have happened in the past to give you an idea. So let me call this up. I was just looking at this today. All right. So when the Chiefs at one point they forfeited. So this was Schefter kind of compiling this. The Chiefs gave up a 3rd round pick and then a 6th rounder the next year because they tampered with Jeremy Maclin in 2015. Right. And then they were fined a bunch of money. The Dolphins, they forfeited their 2023 1st round pick. They just forfeited it. So the pick just got eliminated from the round, plus a 2024 3rd rounder. And they were tampering with Tom Brady and Sean Payton 3 different times. And they fined the Dolphins a bunch of money. But Rodrigo, typically in these situations, picks get forfeited. That's not always the case. I believe, let me see what happened with let's see. When the Cardinals and the Eagles tampered, Cardinals-Eagles tampering. So if you remember when the Cardinals got whacked for tampering with the Eagles, okay, this is where a team can actually be awarded picks. So the Cardinals and the Eagles, they settled the tampering investigation because the Eagles thought that Jonathan Gannon wasn't getting a job. So they thought he was staying. And then Vic Fangio took, as a consultant with the Eagles, he took the Miami Dolphins defensive coordinator job. This was last year. Then after that happened, Gannon takes the Cardinals head coaching job. So the Eagles, felt like, wait a second, how did this happen? Right? There's something illegal happened here during a window where teams weren't supposed to be talking to candidates and interviewing. And so that ended up being worked out where the Eagles and Cardinals swapped third-round picks, and then Arizona got Philly's fifth-rounder in 2024. So the Eagles got to jump 28 spots in last year's third round from number 94 to number 66. So in that case, the team ended up acquiring a pick from the team that was the offender, essentially. Now, will the Giants and Eagles rivals settle a tampering investigation together? That would be the day, I'd say. That would be the day. But, Rodrigo, to answer your question, there are times where picks get forfeited, and then there are times like that where it gets settled and a team receives value. All right, let's see. Let's get back into the queue. Thank you for that super sticker, Rodrigo. All right. And let's see what's going on in this Sixers-Knicks game as we talk. Knicks up 5 with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Oh, boy. Jacob says, Harrison Jr.'s mother definitely hung up on Pat. No, I did not speak with Marvin Harrison Jr.'s mother. I will say, though, I did get MF'd and hung up on today, reaching out to a member of the Harrison camp. So I would say as a reporter, that tells me I'm on the right track for a story. That's, if you're listening, that's what that tells me. Connor says, any chance you think the Giants would flop spots with the Chargers for JJ if the board goes Williams, Daniels, May, Marvin Harrison Jr.? That Connor, this is the one thing listen. Do I think it's May more is the trade up guy and McCarthy maybe the guy you take, but you're not mortgaging the future assets for? Maybe, but I personally think they like both quarterbacks. And Connor, what I can't tell you is for sure that they would mortgage the farm for JJ McCarthy. Like, I can't sit here and tell you that. I did have somebody tell me May is the guy directly. I did break the news that they were working him out in Ann Arbor privately, JJ McCarthy, on Easter Sunday. I thought that was a very interesting part of the process, as well as he and May both visited the Giants facility on top 30 visits very early in the process. That was another thing that stood out. I also just feel all of my reporting on this entire process and the Giants offseason and where they stand and what they want, what they feel they need. I just refuse to walk into Thursday night looking at a position other than quarterback until they take him, right? We're doing the reporting, like I said, calling around to Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors. You're doing all this work. You're looking into the Rome Odunzes of the world. We did our 2-part series on offensive line and what that might look like. Do they take one at the top or not? All these permutations are things that we're working out and we're talking about. But Connor, for me, it's either quarterback or not. And until it's not quarterback, it is. That's my motto on the Giants right now. Tudo says, Chronicles, all good fella. We're packing and traveling to the UK for joint training camp and training. Some friendly tests or matches ahead. Please pray for our safety, mate. We will, Tuto. Crunch Bunch says, I want New York to trade up for May at 3. But New England would not only have to have the right compensation from New York to trade down, but they would need a trade up to prevent the Vikings from trading up for JJ. Right. Like if they were trading down to move back up to prevent that. So you'd essentially, if you're the Patriots, you'd almost be trying to work out two deals simultaneously, or have the one right in the hopper. But there's no way you can really prevent the Vikings from jumping back ahead of you with the kind of capital they have is the problem. So that's why that becomes complicated. But that's really well put, Crunch Bunch, about how they have to navigate that board if that's what they want to do. A lot of variables to consider there, though, as we saw with the Monty Ossenfort clip made available publicly today from the Cardinals War Room last year, it can happen in a civilized way, even though these guys are under pressure. No Mets says May is going to the Commanders most likely. No Mets, I'm glad you said that because, to be honest, if Antoine and I were doing our mock differently and he was making the first pick and I was making the second pick, I might have given the Commanders Drake May, because this noise about Jaden Daniels not loving it there and being like essentially reluctant to play there, but that he will, that just doesn't strike me as a player who's going to fit Dan Quinn. Because he's not the offensive coordinator, but he is the head coach. Now, I know again, you have an owner. If the owner feels like Jaden Daniels is the guy, then Dan Quinn might not really be making the decision at the end of the day, because it's Adam Peters and Josh Harris and not Dan Quinn making the decision. So that's where those things can obviously happen. And you can end up hearing after the fact that not everybody was on board with a specific player. But I do think, Mets, that I'm on board with you, that I'm not saying Drake May is definitely going to, but I'm saying that I think I don't think Daniels is a shoe in it too. But that's just me. And no Mets. Tuto says, Pat, Giants don't need to trade and lose more picks and assets necessarily. Be patient. Take a top dog wide receiver one who's available. Do your diligence and be smart with every pick. Every dollar spent. No need for luck or gamble. All right. Appreciate that insight, Tuto, as always. Hunter says, if we pick a QB at 6, got to do something to get a wide receiver early second. Something got to hopefully a stud slips to us at 6. Any shot at Bo Nix or something like that? Yeah, maybe in the second round, a Bo Nix, that could be the area he goes. I think that a couple players that I would just say, while we're talking about the first round in general too, a couple players that really are jumping on the board to me right now are Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU, the wide receiver. I feel like he could go higher than people think. Led college football in touchdown catches last year with 17. A guy who has all the measurables and everything on the field that these teams are looking for. Really feel like he's being undervalued in mock drafts. So keep an eye on him. And then Laiatu Latu from UCLA. I know he had the neck fusion surgery and those concerns, the medical retirement earlier in college. But this is a guy that I love to say this. I believe this wholeheartedly about the draft and about trades and pro sports. It only takes one. And, that means it only takes one team to love a player to take a player, right? To take him higher than you think he should have been, or to ruin your mock draft because they had him higher on their board than everybody else, right? This is a player that is continuing to rise, that I hear his name a lot. And I'm wondering, we talk about the injury questions of a guy like Michael Penix Jr. or Latu, right? That, I'm not sure these are concerns that are going to bump a player like that down the board. I know, like I told you guys, and I talked to Joe Shane about, Michael Penix Jr. sounds like, teams are not concerned about him, that's going to vault him up the board. Crunch Bunch says, I can't take the suspense of you knowing something that we don't and not being able to tell us because it's not fully confirmed. Please tell us the Giants are close to securing the third pick. Crunch Bunch, I love, you're being a good reporter yourself right now, because you're kind of let me ask this another way, or let me get a rise out of you, or let me address exactly what I think you're saying and see how you react and see if you give it away, right? Another sip of the cab there. Thanks for being here, guys. We're on the Talkin Ball Live with Pat Leonard podcast. Mondays and Thursdays, 9 p.m. Eastern, unless something else gets in the way. So we're Monday here. Thursday night, obviously, it's not in the way, but it's right there smack dab on Thursday night. It's the NFL Draft's first round, picks 1 through 32, 2024. And so we're going to do a lunchtime or early afternoon live on the channel to prime the pump for what's to come on Thursday evening. And then I will check in after the first round, after the Giants pick, come back live, and we can talk a little bit more. But I'm not going to go live during the first round, like through the Giants pick right away, just because I want to be able to go in there and talk to Joe Shane and Brian Daboll directly for you guys and come out and give you my firsthand knowledge and insight on updates on what they said, what they heard. I'll get a chance to talk to Drake May, their first round pick, and get a chance to talk to him at least on conference call and come back to you guys with first impressions of the player and of the person and all of those things. And so I think the best way to do it is to kind of marry both of my responsibilities right now, both the reporting and writing and insight aspect, because as Jacob said earlier, one of the special things we're doing here is that there are plenty of people out there. I'm sure some of the people, and I know some of the people who check in on our channel, who are great Giants content creators, NFL content creators, people who are driving the conversation and bringing us together to talk about the team and the sport that we love. But what's unique about our channel is that I cover the team every day for the New York Daily News, sources in the locker room, sources in the building, sources around the team, sources around the league. And so I'm giving you guys firsthand knowledge that really isn't being done. And that, starting last season when I was doing these post-game lives, could really sense from you day oneers here on the channel how much of an appetite there was for you guys to get inside the locker room, to follow me in and let me be your eyes and ears and really bring it back to you. And then you guys can also give me your input and your knowledge and your information, and we can turn it into a great full-fledged picture of what maybe the Giants look like and what we think they should look like and how they can get there. But that's what's unique about what we're doing here, Crunch Bunch, and I appreciate you being here. And you're right, sometimes there are things we can't share right away. But I promise you, Crunch Bunch, I promise you this. If someone told me right now, here's the trade for 3 that we're about to make and, hold it for an hour, I promise you I would tell that person, where you can take that comment that I have to hold that for an hour, because I'm going to break this news right now and you're going to authorize it for me right now, because that is enormous news and it would break draft Twitter. I know it's called X, but it would break draft Twitter. It would break the minds of NFL fans, and it would confirm what I believed all along, which is that the Giants are hunting a quarterback big time. All right. D-Kit, what up? All right. D-Kit says, what type of communication do you actually have right now with the Giants front office? Do they answer calls and questions, or are they pretty mum? The Giants front office is tight-lipped right now, man. It's tight-lipped. Listen, how do I put this? You have relationships with people, so you communicate with people, and those relationships don't just stop, right? Like to have a relationship, you cultivate it and you continue it and you build it. But there are times of the year like this where the conversations are shorter, or the conversations become, let's say everybody knows what questions aren't going to be answered and what isn't going to be talked about and what topics are going to be off limits, right? And so maybe you still press the issue, but you also know if I pressed once here and they didn't go for it, I'm going to back off. So it's a long-winded way, D-Kit, of saying that communication occurs, but the Giants front office, just like all these front offices, they have a lot invested in not sharing things right now. And sometimes, D-Kit, and these are the mind-blowing crazy parts of this job that could drive you crazy if you don't manage it properly, like mentally. Sometimes someone's not answering, or not willing to share, not willing to share, not willing to share, not willing to share. Suddenly they have something they want you to know. Oh, yeah, and you can report this, right? You have to stop when that happens in your mind because it's your urge. You're kind of like, you're waiting and waiting for a nugget and for a piece of information. And then finally, here it comes. You have to remember, though, if this person was stonewalling me for 2 weeks on all my requests, and now there's something I wasn't asking for and they're giving it to me, why? Right? Why do they want that out there? How does that benefit them? Is this something like I need to double check this, right? But I need to find other sources. I need to confirm. But is this something that is an agenda driven and it's true, or it's agenda driven and I question its validity? Or is it somebody genuinely helping me and giving me information? And you're making those decisions by not only your own decision making yourself, but consulting people you trust, confirming the information. You're doing all those things in rapid time, right? And so that's the job. I don't know if that gives you a good indication of how these things can happen, but it's a really interesting time of year in that regard. And you have to, almost have to experience those situations in order to get to get good enough at them. Or good is not the right word. To be able to process them properly in the timing you need to in order to take it in whatever direction it needs to go. Chronicle says, wow, Drake May, what do you know? Tell me more. Oh, that was me making a joke. Like when I said, I'll be talking to the first round pick, Drake May, right? That was me slipping in who I think they are going to take if they can, and who I've reported here. I know that they like, right? I don't know if it's going to be Drake May. They might not have a chance to get Drake May. He's definitely the player I've been told they like up there. I also know they like JJ McCarthy. But that was not me reporting they're absolutely going to draft him and they already know they can get him. That's not what I was saying there, Chronicles. I'm sorry if I misled you. I was just making a joke about if we're talking to a player after they select. I was making the joke that it would be Drake May because that's where I feel like this could be headed. All right, let's see. Crunch Bunch says, I need hope. That's pretty much where the Giants fan base is, right? Hunter says, if you plan to draft a QB, pay Slayton 100%. If you draft a wide receiver, look to move him. Yeah. I mean, I wonder if they would give Slayton a raise. I mean, that's where I'm skeptical. Like, that's why I view Slayton not reporting as a player who knows that that's going to probably facilitate a trade, just knowing that how hard it was at first to convince the team that he was even worthy of a roster spot. And then, yes, they did negotiate a contract with him and paid him after he proved himself, or re-signed him, I should say, on the 2-year deal. But they also have not, let's see, like Joe Shane just was very honest about it. He said, like, they haven't had any extension conversations, and he didn't say we're not going to, but in a way he intimated that might not happen at all, because he said, like, listen, we just negotiated this 2-year deal. It just happened. So usually that's the kind of comment somebody makes, like, why would I revisit this? This guy's under contract and we literally just did it. Right. So that's why I view the Slayton decision, and a calculated one by his camp, as one that is more likely to facilitate a trade than anything. But Hunter, I see where your breakdown goes back and forth there. Rich, what's going on, man? He says, what's up, Pat? Is it a lock the Giants will take a QB in the draft? What are the chances they don't take one at all? I think they do. I think they want to. If they don't, I think it's just because they can't get to their guy. I don't think it'll be because they weren't intending to draft one. I think all of the signs point to them trying to draft a quarterback, and it's just a matter of whether they can get him. That doesn't mean they're definitely going to get a QB. Depends on how the board falls. But, of course, they're kind of at the mercy of these teams in front of them. I do think I know a couple of you, I think Rodrigo and was it Doug? I think a couple people earlier brought up the idea of the Chargers being involved in a possible just, short trade up there. Like I think you got to watch 3, 4, and 5 for the Giants, depending on, because think about, you could be protecting that your quarterback pick at 5, right? It could be 3 or 4 too, but it could be 5, depending on elite players like Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors impacting the top of the board, right? And I personally think the Chargers would like to trade back. And like I said, Talise Fuaga's a guy to watch if they do that, the Oregon State tackle. Crunch Bunch says, thoughts on character concerns that are starting to gain more steam down the stretch, any validity or smoke? There are some character things on Malik Neighbors' resume that people are looking into for sure. Yeah, I knew exactly what you meant, Crunch Bunch. Thank you. There's things they're looking into. That is all about eye of the beholder type stuff. Let's just put it this way, Crunch Bunch. Even though that's true, there are several teams that have him as their number one receiver on their board. And because of that, that tells you that there are several teams that aren't concerned about the character stuff, right? He wouldn't be their top receiver on their board. And then you don't tell somebody, an assistant GM doesn't tell a reporter, let's say, hey, Neighbors is the first receiver on our board. But then secretly it's like, oh, but he actually is 7th because we have concerned about his character, but we're not telling you that, right? No, number 1 is number 1. So I think that's informative of maybe how some of these teams feel about it. But that's a team case-by-case basis for sure. And not that it's the same thing, but I would say that Joe Schoen taking Kayvon Thibodeau, number 5 overall, like a guy who people had questions about, what was his priority, how much he was involved in off the field, even though he was a diligent football player, and what his ultimate ambitions were, and what he spread his, what he spread too thin, and was he hot and cold, and those types of things. Schoen took a somewhat controversial lightning rod player, number 5 overall, in Thibodeau in his first draft. So when I hear a guy has flags, that Schoen obviously has to look into things, and he's going to do his due diligence as the Giants GM, and the Giants are going to go through things with a fine-tooth comb. But I thought that reflected to me that Schoen is willing to sift through the noise and not let it deter him from picking the player. So that's why, just anecdotally, to me, that doesn't sound like Neighbors would be ruled out by the Giants. As a guy who not ruled off a board, but just bumped down. But I don't know that for sure. But that's just me going off the anecdotal evidence of his previous draft. Undefined says Jim Plunkett won 2 Super Bowls on his 3rd team. Trent Dilfer won a Super Bowl. A little too much hate for Jones. The team stinks. Coaching and management is more unproven than the quarterback. Undefined. I don't hate your premise there about, the idea that it's the whole operation that needs to improve. It's not just Daniel, very much so. But let me be clear. Daniel Jones not being the Giants' future answer is something that I and others have identified that looks like the way the Giants feel about him, right? So this is not just me saying get Daniel Jones out of here, right? I think my coverage of Daniel has been pretty balanced and fair. I like Daniel a lot. Very grateful for, the help he's given me over the years, honestly. And I know people who still believe in him very strongly, right? But I think my read on how the Giants feel about him, and that their belief has wavered, and also his injury history, and also their actions this offseason at the quarterback position, have all pointed to one thing, right? So it's not me hating Daniel Jones or hating on Daniel Jones. I think it's more looking at the way that the organization is operating around him. Hunter says, what do you think the Falcons lose in that tampering? I doubt Eagles lose anything. Well, a severe penalty would involve a first-round pick. Now, so maybe it involves next year's first. But I don't know. But that was my first thought when I when I heard today that the ruling is closing in, that was my first thought. Maybe it's a 1 for them and a 3 for the Eagles, or as the headlining pieces of the penalties. A2Z Me says, "Hey Pat, thanks for all the great content lately. Can't wait for the draft as a Giants fan. That's all I have left. Go Blue." Thank you, A2. No, thanks for always being here, man. Really appreciate it. I get you, man. I'm ready for Thursday as well. I got to be honest with you. Enough of the chatter. Let's get to it, right? That's that I'm starting to feel that way. Kelly says, "Not sure if you already talked about this. What are the latest rumors about the first 6 picks? What do you think about the Patriots taking JJ?" Need a sip of Cabernet for that one. All right. So, Kelly, I think my best understanding is, like I said earlier, there is a part of me that wonders, talking to some people about the Commanders, that Jaden Daniels not wanting to play there, or not sure he wants to play there, and disappointment in the visit. Is that going to impact ultimately whether they select him or not? I don't know. I do think it creates a little bit more uncertainty than some people are acting like it has. Like I do think there is uncertainty there. Ultimately, though, he could be the pick, and if he's not the pick at 2, I think he would probably be the pick at 3. So that would make sense to me. But I think right now, like, yes, you do hear the noise about JJ McCarthy and the Patriots. I think the Patriots are looking to trade back and still get their quarterback. But they've got Elliott Wolf, who's very experienced, but not even the GM in title. And you've got an owner who really wants a quarterback. So if you're Elliott Wolf there, you have to be really careful about how you operate, okay? You have to be careful about how you operate at 3 in order to make sure you get that QB. So let me paint a picture here, Kelly. So let's say it's Caleb Williams 1, Jaden Daniels 2. And let's say the Patriots know that the Giants and the Vikings are both trying to trade up for Drake May at 3. And let's say the Patriots want JJ McCarthy. Where are they trading back to? 11 with the Vikings or 6 with the Giants, right? Like that, to me, is a very interesting call. Obviously, in that scenario, it's more likely to 6. But remember, you're making that trade, right? Let's say you make that trade with the Giants, and the Giants trade up to 3 and take Drake May. And you're now at 6. But let's say the Vikings really are eyeing JJ McCarthy as well, or we're happy getting Drake May or JJ McCarthy, and they want one of those 2 quarterbacks, and they'd be happy with either, and they would sell the farm for either. If you're the Patriots and you move back to 6 there, you now have to go back up to 4 to protect your turf on JJ, possibly, because the Vikings have 2 first-round picks, right? I left them out earlier. The Vikings, the Cardinals, the Bears, they all have multiple first-round picks. So if you're the Patriots, this is what I hear about the top of the draft there, Kelly. The Patriots are looking into all those things, but they need to be prepared to be in a position where they're not trading themselves out of their player. If this is why, if you want a quarterback and you love a quarterback, you take them. And this is why, Kelly, this is what's funny about the draft too. Like, one thing I never buy is, like, let's say somebody says, "Oh, I love this player at 12, but not at 9," right? It's like, well, what do you mean? Like, this guy, yes, you want to trade back a couple slots to get more assets. And if you could get the same player 5 picks later and accrue more assets in a trade back, yes, of course, that's a better idea. Yes, of course. But if you love a quarterback, let's say at 12, taking him at 9 is not too high. Like 12 and 9, whatever it is, if you're drafting a franchise quarterback in the top of the first round, or 3 to 6, or 4 and 8, or whatever, like, I firmly believe that you love the quarterback, you take him high. You take him where you are, Like back when they took Daniel Jones 6 overall, Dave Gettleman, like that surprised me how highly he got picked in that draft. But I can't say I disagree with the idea that, like we were parsing back in the day of, you can't draft a player like that at 6. You got to wait till take him at 15 or 16 or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, you either take him in the first round or you don't, and where your first round pick is, if you believe he's a franchise quarterback, you take him. And so, Kelly, I bring that up because in answer to your question about the Patriots and about the top half of the draft there and the top of the first round, it's kind of this idea of, if the Patriots adjudge J.J. McCarthy as a franchise quarterback, yes, you would love to accrue assets and to trade back for a team coming up for Drake May in that scenario and still be able to get JJ. But you can't lose your franchise quarterback if that's the end goal. So a lot of times those types of scenarios end up with a team just picking the quarterback in the spot they're in, right? Their preferred QB. But we'll see. Wouldn't that be interesting, right? I painted that earlier. Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels. Let's say it's J.J. McCarthy third. Now, is that fourth pick a charge up between the Vikings and the Giants, like an absolute war for that fourth pick with the Cardinals? I think that is a really, like that would be the most dramatic scenario to me. The most dramatic scenario for the Giants might be Drake May slipping to 4. That might be the most dramatic scenario. BBU says, Pat, my man. BBU, thanks for being here. Jonathan says, I said Drake May. First round pick, takes a glass of Cabernet away. Yeah, got to have that cab, man, especially tonight. We're on like draft eve, BBU says on the Penix injury history thing, Adam Schefter noted medicals aren't as big of a deal to NFL teams as it is in the media. It could be why we didn't have 30 visit, no medicals. Well, no, he had medical history that needed to be looked into, but he also was at the combine. So that's why I said BBU too when I reported that last live, that he didn't take a top 30. It's possible sometimes that the team doesn't have, you're right, any questions left about the medical. But when a guy has an extensive history like that, usually you want to bring him in for a closer look. Also, to take a quarterback, John Mara, presumably, based on what he said. Now, I left that out on the whole quarterback thing. John Mara, like, speaking on and on about how he's ready to take a quarterback if they want and bring him in and compete with Daniel Jones and all of that. I mean, the fact that somebody thinks that they're not going to try to draft a quarterback is ludicrous after listening to him. Jeez. Salient says, hey, Pat, how's it going? At what point do you experience pre-draft burnout or saturation? Right now. No, Salient, that's a really good question. I think doing these podcasts and doing the podcasting, like having guests on, has really been a welcome part of this. You do get to a point, especially Salient, when you're chasing the scenarios and the exact pick information. Like the insider business part of our job is a real grind, because I have had reports that have been true one day, and then the next day they looked like they weren't, but they were true Tuesday. But then Wednesday, it looked like they were the total opposite. Or information in your hand that you don't go with because you got to double check it. And then a couple of days later, it comes to fruition. Or we talk on and on about these scenarios and these trades and, where players rank. I'll tell you what, Salient, one thing that drives you kind of back and forth is people's different opinions on players. And that's part of the scouting process and the pre-draft process. But you get to a point where you hear, for every person you hear, they rank this receiver over that guy, you call somebody else and they flip it. Or you hear one person say that somebody's off-field concerns are major concerns. And then you call the next guy and you say, yeah, no big deal. Everybody's got them on their board, right? So it is really all in the eye of the beholder. And that's why, like I get information, I have information, I talk to people, I have these relationships, but because these front offices are tight-lipped, because they are intentionally either running smoke screens or, like I said, in the Giants, a lot of team scenarios, in the Patriots scenario, these teams are looking into all these potential avenues, right? So when the Patriots start telling teams, oh, we're considering a trade back, but here's what it's got to look like. Or if the Giants, when they're calling up at the teams ahead of them and then inviting teams to call back, all those things either get out or they tell us that it's happening. And so it ends up almost being like a canvas BBU or salient, where it's like eventually you have so many things thrown against the wall. It's like you can't see the picture anymore, right? So sometimes the best thing to do, salient, is to just wipe it clean and think with a clear head. And that's why salient, and this is probably going to be my story previewing the draft for the Daily News on Thursday. And that is, maybe they don't take a quarterback at number 6, but every single darn thing they have done this offseason has pointed to taking a quarterback. Every single one. The only thing they could have done more to make it obvious would be like not sign Drew Lock and go into the draft with Daniel Jones and just Tommy DeVito. But I view this as them having 2 guys in a practice squad right now, so they essentially only have 2 QBs. But I think that's the best thing to do, salient, is to kind of like to wipe it clean and to kind of just think about it. Knicks win again, up 2-0. D-Kit says, it's human nature, but do current players contact you to see what you know or for your opinion? I wonder whether today's generation care enough. You know, D-Kit, this actually happens to me a lot in the locker room. Those types of things happen in the locker room where when things are happening with the team or around the league, it doesn't have to be with the Giants. It could be around the league. Players will ask you, hey, did you see this? Or what have you heard about this? Or what are people telling you about that? Or, you know, they might want your input on an issue, and maybe they won't tell you how they feel, but maybe their question will indicate to you how they feel, if that makes sense. And yeah, in the off season, you have conversations like that too. But definitely through the season when there's the ebbs and flows of play, because these guys, you know, you have your conversations and your sources, but away from the field, like these guys like to get away from the game in the off season. And so during the year when they're winning and losing games and guys are winning and losing jobs and that kind of stuff is really when a lot of that kind of brain picking happens. That's a really good question, D-Kit. MD says, based on what you know and I've heard from the Giants camp, if hypothetically the Patriots trade with the Vikings and they get Drake May, would you see it as a failure as Joe Shane's part to miss out? MD, that would depend on what the trade offer looked like there from the Giants and whether that would really depend on if Drake May was like, we have to get this guy, you know, we absolutely have to get him and we're going to do everything we can to do it. And then you don't, let's say, put that one extra draft pick that could have gotten it done into it. And it's, you know, and listen, it would probably take a while to drill down to the details of why they won or lost a trade up for a player. So we might not have that information right away or for a while. I do think that, you know, because they can land a good player at 6, if they don't get the quarterback, you know, it's not going to be viewed immediately as a failure because they're going to add a talented player there if they don't get a QB. You know, it'll look like somebody who is going to improve their team. So it's going to be hard to like bury them for getting a really good player, right? Like that's not something, you know, if you add a Malik Neighbors or a Marvin Harrison Jr. or a Rome Odunze to your team, you're excited about having those guys on your team, right? So that's not like a failure to land a good player. But my read on their quarterback hunt is that that's exactly what it is. And I know they've spoken in support of Daniel Jones, especially lately. But let's just put it this way. Rich Eisen did not come out and say that the Giants are absolutely done with Daniel Jones for no reason. Like, Rich is a reputable person. He's plugged in. And, I'll just leave that there. Beast of the East says, Neighbors reminds me of Steph Diggs' talent and character. Hunter says, your Knicks won a very good game. Your Knicks win was a very good game. Weird waters I tread here, being from New Hampshire. Only New York team I like is the Giants. Undefined says, I know you like Daniel Jones. I meant others, like you said, the whole operation. Yeah, I got you. Appreciate you. Crunch Bunch says, I agree, Pat. I hope they love McCarthy and take him at 3. They can't risk losing him if they trade down. Talking about New England, yeah. Steven says, it has to be a 3-way trade with Arizona and New England because New England won't want Minnesota jumping them even at 6. Right. Yeah, exactly. They would need to get right back to 4. Mm-hmm. Crunch Bunch says, is there a sense they prefer JJ over May or vice versa? Crunch, I think it's May. But you know what? Like, listen, I know they like both players. I had somebody tell me before I went live last time, a week ago or last Thursday, when we went live maybe a week ago, I had somebody tell me flat out, Drake May is the guy. He's the Giants guy. So that is the strongest intel I have on that. I also have heard that they like JJ. There's some people who feel like they like JJ McCarthy up to a point, right? So in other words, hey, good player, not a top 6 player, right? But to be honest with you, I don't trust that. I don't trust that the Giants aren't trying to throw people off on that stuff because I know they like the kid. I know they like the player, right? I know they like the prospect. So, hearing something like that's what I mean about this type of season, like Salient asked. It gets to the point where your eyes and ears and sources tell you one thing, and then you hear something that maybe contradicts it a little later, and then you think, no, like that doesn't add up. Why, right? Why would you say that? Or why would anybody feel that doesn't make any sense? All the other signs point to this, right? So that's where it gets a little bonkers, and you really have to know who to trust. And this is why experience matters in this business. I do think though, like my most reliable information says they like both, but right now I would put May over JJ. Yeah. Bombo says, hey, Pat, my main concern for the team is Dable. Year 1, we won by Saquon and Daniel Jones running for their lives. It seemed like Dable was a net negative on game days and with his year 2 game plan. Thoughts? Bombo, you are preaching to the choir here, my man. I think that's a really, really good point and question. I think that Dable's on the hot seat this year. I think his game management, you forget. So we all know that we're not going to relitigate all the relationship stuff with coaches and how he's treated people and how people, were streaming out the door after the season and that kind of thing. But not only that game day behavior, but also game day and situation management, right? Like even in that first year, his management of that playoff game in Philadelphia, that blowout was really concerning. And I think it was a lot, even though he won Coach of the Year that year for what he did with kind of working with the strengths and weaknesses of the Giants, and he did a good job with that. I felt like it was a defense-driven and run game-driven season and really first half of the season, and the Giants really fell off late and were not a very good team down the stretch of that year outside of that Colts game and the playoff win in Minnesota. Obviously, that was an impressive performance by Jones, and Dable seemed to unlock something there or help unlock something. But going into year 2, I think you really saw with the lack of preparation for these games and management of these games from the head coach standpoint and even the general manager's assembly of parts of the roster, I do agree that's a major concern going into this year. And I think with Bill Belichick being a free agent, all the more reason to be watching Dable entering year 3. Kelly says, thank you. I totally agree with you. Get your guy. Rumors of Patriots taking JJ at 3. Absolute drama. What cab are you drinking? This one is a new one I've tried. It's called Textbook. I think it's made by the Pay family. I think it is Pey. Just a new bottle that I picked up, recommended to me by a friend, and I can't recommend it highly enough. It's delicious. I love Banshee. Also, is a one that I love. Banshee. But this textbook, this is what it's called, is getting it done. Recommend it highly, Kelly. Intel says, draft a QB. We love it. Short and to the point. Intel. Let's see. All right. Who do we have next? All right. Again, thanks for being here, guys. We're an hour and 30 in. Probably going to wrap up soon after I get to the rest of these questions. Really appreciate all of your participation. Chronicles, I see you say down there that I skipped your super chat, but I thought I saw you say the Drake May, what do you know? Tell me more. I think I did hit that, but let me know if I skipped that. Really apologize if I did. I will throw that up there on the screen, though, if I didn't. But yeah, that was me, Chronicles. I'm not sure if you heard me address that, but thank you for the super chat. And I really appreciate the support, obviously, as always. And yeah, I was kind of slipping. I was pretending I was slipping, like that I knew he was the pick. But, I was kind of saying there that, if we were interviewing the player after the pick, we always get to interview the Giants draft pick right after they select him. And so I was joking that it would be Drake May. Let's see. BBU says, yeah, that's what I meant. Maybe they don't have a lot of medical questions left on Penix, but like you said, the marathon does make it interesting. Maybe a virtual meeting with ownership, possibly. Yeah, BBU. The other thing about that is, like, if the Giants really are playing a game, and let's say Penix Jr. is a guy they absolutely love and they want to keep a secret, you could avoid the top 30 visit in order to kind of conceal how high he is on your list, right? And, like, they've shown a ton of interest in Michael Penix Jr. He would be my dark horse. You got May, you got McCarthy. Penix would be a dark horse there because what a great throw of the football he is. But I haven't heard somebody tell me as directly like the things that I've reported to you guys on May and McCarthy. D-Kit says, Pat, it seems to me that Dable has been friendlier with the beat writers so far than he was all last year when he was borderline hostile. Have you noticed? Definitely know what you mean, D-Kit. Those daily press conferences became exercises in futility. Not a lot of genuine friendliness there for sure. I agree. Losing tends to breed that. But we didn't get that hostility with the last coach. And so, yeah, I do think, listen, all the things I reported about his demeanor and relationships with people, game day, temper, dysfunction with the staff, like all those things are true. And so there are some things that Brian Dable has done well and gotten patted on the back for, but these are things that he has to work on and his job is on the line. And so, yeah, I think the part of the behavior that needs to change and that maybe you're seeing changing is, maybe more helpfulness in that realm. But I can't speak for him, but I do know what you mean about sounding like you're seeing like a softer side that may be in response to that. Yeah, Chronicles, let me know if I actually jumped that. I think there was a similar chat, so that's why you say, okay. Yeah, no, I hit that. Maybe I forgot to put it up on the screen, though. Apologies, but really appreciated you supporting there. Oh, D-Kid also said, I was also talking about the draft when it comes to players asking about my opinion. Yeah. Oh, yeah. During the draft, you definitely get players asking about the draft as well. They're super curious. They also have, though, a lot of relationships, right? A lot of these guys have played with some of the guys who are coming out of school now. So those are also important people to talk to as a source, right? You're reaching out to players to pick their brains about what they know or think about these guys, right? So it goes both ways there. Thanks for all your support, D-Kit. You always have really good questions, too. Yeah, MD said hard to really have right, whether it be a failure on Joe Shane's part. Yep. No, thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that. It was a good question, MD. Intel says just rebuild the team, not that hard. Antonio says, what are you hearing is the price to trading up to number 3? Hope everything is well, Pat. It's that time of year. Antonio, great to see you. Hope you're well as well. Let's see. Hold on, a couple texts coming in. Let's see. Sorry about that. Just checking the cell phone. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do, right? All right. So Antonio said, what are you hearing is the price to trading up to number 3? Well, for the Giants, like I would think you'd have to be including next year's one for that. I mean, with the absence of your extra second this year, right? Not to mention the quarterback tax. I don't know that for sure, but based on what Arizona and New England are saying, and especially even what Arizona said about the type of deal that they are looking for to move out of that spot, these are picks that are going to be costly to acquire. They're picks where those teams know they're going to get a premier player if they stay, and they're not looking to trade out because it's some kind of weak class at the positions they're looking for or anything like that. So, the Sam Darnold trade, when the Jets traded up from 6 to 3 to pick him in that draft behind Baker Mayfield and Saquon Barkley, that was 3 twos that they gave up to the Indianapolis Colts, I believe. And so the Giants don't have 3 twos to play around with at the moment. But I would think based on the amount of competition for these trades up and for these quarterbacks this year, you're looking at a higher price. And then with the Giants not having that too, you're looking at them probably having to move that extra 1, which obviously becomes a very difficult proposition. So can they find a way to do that type of expensive deal using the 2 twos they have this year and next year, right? 1 each year, and then finding a way to skirt around using that 1? I don't know. It's going to be hard. Let's see. Jimmy says, Pat, have you heard if the Giants are going to seriously consider moving up to number 3 for May? Jimmy, I wouldn't put it past them. I mean, doing next year's 1 is tough. I mean, it's tough to stomach, especially because it could be a very high pick. But I frankly believe they have been acting like a team that if they land on their quarterback, they're going to go get him. And so there is a breaking point, of course, for teams' desires when it comes to trading up, right? You're not just going to spend anything, right? There's a breaking point for everything. Just like you and I, when we go to the grocery store, right? You might go into a store and maybe apples are more expensive today, but it's still reasonable, right? Oh, it's not $1.89 a pound. It's $2.19 a pound. I'll buy it. Oh, but tomorrow it's $3.29 a pound. No, I'm not buying apples today, right? It's the same kind of deal. So I don't know exactly what Joe Shane's breaking point is, and also we don't know if even if the Giants try to compete with the Minnesota Vikings offer, if the Vikings are competing for that spot, is New England going to take the Giants offer over a Vikings offer that includes 2 first-round picks this year? That's the question. Hunter says, not a draft question. So when you build relationships with players and coaches, do you still stay in contact with a lot of the guys that move on elsewhere? Yes, definitely, Hunter. One interesting part of the job is once you're in the business for a little while, your network really starts to grow. And just staying in touch with people becomes a daily responsibility, right? Like, it's not easy to stay in touch with people day in and day out once your network expands beyond your team and your area, and then it goes nationwide, and then people are jumping organization to organization, and then when you started, you knew people in 2 organizations, and now you know people in 25 or whatever it is. And yeah, Hunter, that's actually a fascinating part of how it grows. Is even just when you start close to one organization, your web starts to grow simply because people from that organization bounce around, right? And then there's agents who have players at that organization who have players on other teams. And then so you're starting to branch out, understand other teams, but also maybe understand when those agents' players are also being pursued by the Giants. You also have the players who go from organization to organization, and you get to know them in the locker room, especially well when you're covering a certain team. And then along with, let's say, going to the Super Bowl, walking into those locker rooms and kind of pressing the flesh with those teams around the league and getting to know them, obviously starting in college at the NFL Combine, at the Senior Bowl, and these showcases. And so you're constantly building that network, Hunter. And your responsibility really as a reporter is to make sure you retain those relationships when these people move elsewhere, because that's how your network grows. Deilla NYG says, look, I respect all that Bill Belichick has done throughout his career, but why is he in discussion for the head coach position? His drafts over the past 10 years. Yeah, well, listen, you're right about his draft record. There's no question about it. Well, I mean, he's definitely the best or one of the 2 or 3 best coaches of all time, depending on what your opinion is. And, you're not necessarily giving him personnel power. In fact, if you don't want to give him personnel power, you say, hey, we're interviewing for the head coach position. Let's find a GM that you can work with, and let's pair you with the general manager we believe in, or whatever the case may be. But I mean, he's a better coach than what most teams have running their teams right now. I mean, I'm not just talking about the Giants. I mean, you put Belichick running the football on Sundays and managing the game and game planning, right? Like this is a guy who has forgotten more football than most of the head coaches outside of a few in the NFL even know. And, last year, like, the offense was obviously a disaster, but last year, I mean, the Patriots defense was legit, right? Like, they had no business being in some of these games, but frankly, if they even had a semblance of quarterback play last year, they would have been good. They would have been a tough team to beat. The only reason the Giants beat them was because the Patriots couldn't score. But I mean, watch Bill Belichick on ESPN's draft coverage. I think you'll gain a deeper appreciation for him. Robert Ferguson says, can you contrast Dable, Coughlin, and Parcells, please? I feel like they're all very close in terms of type of coach. Robert, I mean this incredibly respectfully. Brian Dable does not belong in a conversation with Tom Coughlin and Bill Parcells. I mean, to get in a conversation with those guys, he would need to accomplish, something as the Giants head coach. And that's what he is working towards. And he and Joe Schoen are working towards. I know what you're asking, though. I understand, Robert. You're asking about their demeanor, how they handle players, how they handle staff members, how they handle the sideline. I get it. I think the best way to answer that part of the question, Robert, is to say, when you're great and you have an answer for things, you're allowed to treat people harshly as long as they understand that it's coming from a good place and it's putting them in a position to function and succeed, and that you have their best interest at heart. And especially, like, one of the things I reported in the story I wrote about what went wrong last year is, it's one thing to MF somebody and, for, let's say, doing something wrong. But if you're going to get MF'd on the sideline for calling the wrong play, the next thing from the head coach's mouth has to be, here's what you should have run, or here's what you need to run next time, and here's a way to correct it. You need a solution. And those 2 guys you mentioned there, Coughlin and Parcells, they had solutions. And a major issue last year was that people were getting MF'd with no solutions or suggestions behind them. But those three names don't belong in the same sentence for sure. But I respect the question, Robert, and I appreciate it. Hunter says, hypothetical Giants shocked the world, took Penix at 6. What would you say to that? What would other teams say? Given his injury history, that would be high, but based on their pre-draft, behavior and the aggressiveness that they showed going up to Washington, spending all that time with him for his pro day, it wouldn't shock me. I think he's, like I said, he's probably the dark horse, but at the same time, he's a better thrower of the football and player than at this moment based on his tape than JJ McCarthy. But maybe McCarthy can grow into more. Let's see. Oh, DeIlla said Belichick's drafts have been terrible. The guy has literally done nothing. The game has passed him by. We will see. Oh, yeah, those were texts. That's right. The spidey senses are tingling. That's right. D-Kit says, Pat, it's going to be crazy these next 3 days. It's been said that the closer we get to the more reliable info can be. Are you going to check in with your go-to guys this week? You know it, D-Kit. Candyman says, better late than never. Keep it up, Pat. Can't wait for Christmas draft day. Hey, Candyman, thanks for being here, man. No doubt. Kelly says, can't go wrong with a good cab. Check out Paso Robles, California cabs. They're so good. Josh Sellers is very good. Yes, it is. Paso Robles, big fan. D-Kit says, we're in the home stretch, Pat. After this draft, we're going to know significant things about this management regime. That's right. Pivotal, critical draft for this general manager. Noel Daly says, hey, Pat. Hey, Noel, how you doing? Does the fact that the only receivers that appear for 30 visits with the Giants were the top 3 a sign that they will choose one of them and a quarterback later? No, I don't think so. I think though that it does indicate that they recognize that if they're not going quarterback up there, that they needed to get, their hands dirty on all of those players because those receivers are the most likely group that they're selecting from if they don't get the QB. So I think that's due diligence on just the likelihood of how the board might fall. I don't think that means they won't go receiver later. But it definitely could signal that they view the board falling a certain way that could land one of those guys to them, You're saying that somebody reported that 7 quarterbacks visited the Giants. Let's see. What was it? McCarthy, May, Daniels, Rattler. Wait, McCarthy, May, Daniels, Rattler, Nix. I know those 5. Let's see. Who were the other 2? It wouldn't surprise me. I don't know who the other 2 are, but it wouldn't surprise me if they took if they brought a couple more of those mid-rounders, in the realm of the Bo Nix, Spencer Rattler, right? Let's see. Let me get back into the queue here. D-Kid says, the thing about Belichick is that you would want him to organize the party, but you wouldn't want to invite him. Never heard that one about BB. I like that. Chronicle says, okay, Pat, here's your wrap-up question, your final word. What name is Roger Goodell saying when the Giants are on the clock? Yeah, I still think, look, we got Miz, authentic self, and Miz again. Everybody saying May right there. Okay. So at this moment, that's my answer. But, I'll give my final answer, I guess my final prediction or whatever when we talk live on Thursday early afternoon. And I'll tell you then who I think it's going to be. This is an annoying draft from a prediction perspective, though. It really is, because there's so much uncertainty in front of their pick that it really could go a lot of different ways. But that would be my answer right now. Chronicle says, what are your thoughts on Danny Boy Hustle Hard? He's a character. He's trusted by a lot of players, and I definitely would lose to him in a race. That's what I would say. Let's see. BBU says, saw a report that Patrick Paul took a top 30 with the Giants. Do you have any confirmation on that? I do not have confirmation on that at the moment. That is a player and a position that makes sense for the Giants. They need a swing tackle. He is not one of the names of the tackles that the experts I talked to mentioned to me when we were talking about tackle need and which swing tackles would make sense for the Giants. But that's a very interesting point you just bring up. If Patrick Paul, in fact, visited them for a top 30. Undefined says, read the Parcells book and the story he tells about when he coached at the academy and he got caught chewing out a player by the head coach. All right, I will. Hunter says, May or wide receiver, and I'll be happy with day one. Miz says, Pat, you don't owe us anything. Thank you for your time. No, I know, Miz. I appreciate you, man. It's just you take a lot of pride in this, like when you spend as much time as I do on this, and you outreach to all these sources and you talk to so many people, and then listen, I really love being able to bring you guys news and knowledge and insight that maybe you don't have, not doing this for a living. And sometimes you guys are super plugged in. It surprises even me how you guys, just being diehard fans, are all over what this team needs. And you kind of help me, inform me of what questions I should be asking next, what I should be looking for, and really get a pulse for the fan base and how you guys are feeling and where this is all going to go. But yeah, I just take a lot of pride in this. So, I know I'm not a predictor, I'm a reporter, an analyst, a columnist, those types of things. But when you guys ask me direct questions, I do want to answer them if I can. Omar says, love this format, Pat. First time I have a sports chat. I have my questions read out loud. I appreciate you. Think the Giants go for the quarterback if they are not trading back? Yes, I do. I think they go quarterback if they can. And Omar, please come back Mondays, Thursdays, 9 p.m. Eastern. Follow us, subscribe on the channel, PL on NFL. Hit that like button right now if you guys haven't already while we are live. That pushes the algorithm on YouTube, tells everybody we're here, brings more people here, alerts them, shows up on their next feed, all those things. But Omar, you're just a great example of one of the people who I think shares what I do as far as perspective on what makes this valuable. And, it's the closest thing to me to being face-to-face, sitting down, talking at a bar, having a meetup, which is something, we'll have to do stuff like that down the road. Kind of the Talkin Ball crew meeting up somewhere local, that kind of thing. I know Joey B Comedy is one of the faves and diehards who's pushing that. Authentic. All these people are huge supporters. Gonna have to do it next time. Two Toes in the USA, maybe, perhaps. But that's what I love about this format. It's just more civil. It fosters a conversation, a nice back and forth. And I really love that how respectful everybody is on here. And it doesn't have to be shared, uniform opinions. There are many differing opinions, I think, on these chats, and we go back and forth, but it's an informative dialogue. And I really can't thank you guys enough. Chronicles said, have you ever seen Danny Boy Hustle Hard in action? He is something. He cleaned out OBJ's locker when he got traded. He also was the person who drove Antonio Brown off when he danced off this field at MetLife Stadium with his shirt off. He was the guy waiting for him in the car. Authentic Self said, what do you think QB may then trade for T Higgins? Ooh. So what are you giving up for T though? Are you saying like draft Drake May at 6 if he slips and then give up a 2 and a 2+ for T? Or that's a now we're talking authentic. Now we're talking Authentic Self. I like it. D Kit says, final word. Here's why Penix is the best fit for us. He is a force multiplier who elevates every team he plays on, has the talent to back it up. He would bring his winner mentality to New York. I like Penix, man. I do. If the draft order goes Williams, Daniels, May, Harrison, Neighbors. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What should the Giants do? Fashu KB says. That's either Roma Dunze or JJ McCarthy or a slight trade back, depending on if they feel like one of those two players is the player they like and they feel like they could get him a couple spots later. That I guess the trade back would be for a Dunze if someone was coming to get McCarthy at 6, right? So either a Dunze, McCarthy, or trade back a couple slots and see if you can still get Rome, I guess is probably the move there. Matt Marr says, I am seeing rumors about a trade with Arizona, but with Arizona and LA so unlikely to take a quarterback, why trade? Is it out of fear of Minnesota jumping up and grabbing McCarthy? Yes, Matt, it would be Minnesota, especially. Like Denver profiles as a team that really wants and needs a quarterback, but they have less ammo. But still keep watching them. They're probably more likely though, if they trade up into that like 7, 8, 9 area rather than all the way up. The Raiders are a team to watch. They need a quarterback, at 13. But the Minnesota is the primary team to worry about and watch for. And that is why, Matt, the rumors of Arizona and even New England at 3 and even the Chargers at 5, and is it McCarthy or is it May, right? Like, Josh McCown, Coach May in high school. He's the OC for the Minnesota Vikings right now, or the quarterback's coach for Minnesota Vikings. And so is whether it's May or McCarthy, the Giants more than likely, if they're going to get a quarterback and the quarterback that they like is slipping past that 3rd pick, it's at 4 possibly, or it even could be at 5 in just a slight trade up to protect their turf for that player. And that's where you end up having to protect yourself because the Vikings have picks 11 and 23 in the first round. They acquired the 23rd pick in a trade with the Houston Texans. And so now they have those 2 first, so they have some attractive ammo, even though the Giants are attractive because they have a higher pick to acquire if that team trades back to them. D-Kit says, thanks for another great pod. You're really starting to grow on me. D-Kit, thank you for all your support and your insightful and really interesting and helpful questions for the chat. You've really been helping us drive the conversation the last month or so, and I really do thank you a lot for that. And I'm glad you feel like this is a constructive place to talk. Let's see. Miz says, I'd like that physical running back. I believe Allen from Wisconsin, mid-rounds. We got to get back to our ways, power, ground game, physical in the trenches. I do think that's the type of back that you might see them take. I do think, regardless of who they take at running back, I do think they are going to add a running back in the mid to later rounds. BBU says, I don't know if you talked about it yet, but gut feeling, what would the best trade package Shane can offer to 3 or 4 be? You know what, BBU? I think, either you're giving up a player off your roster in addition to the 2 this year and the 2 next year. Do you dip into the 1 next year? Here's the thing you got to remember. I mean, the best package features a 1 next year. And I know you don't want to give up your first round pick next year, but the bottom line is, whose pick are you giving up? Like if this season goes in the tank and this year's team stinks, like you're not making next year's first round pick anyway, right? So that that's one thing I keep coming back to. I think the best package involves next year's 1, and maybe you're you're using the 1 and this year's 3 and a player, right? So then you protect that 47 overall, maybe, or you try to at least. So you're going up, and then you still have a premier asset to add another really good player who can start on your team. Hunter says, I agree with Miz. Reason why you're one of the best in the business. No one else around that will take time to chat with diehard fans. And I don't take for granted that you guys take the time to chat with me. I'm going to do a big video tomorrow about the draft and what Drake May would do for us. Also, it's 2 to 3 year build, not 1. That's the thing, Miz. Like, I know I'm also somebody who is pushing what I feel is the reality that there is pressure on this regime this year. Like, there is. And so that's like, it didn't shock me, like when Adam Schefter said, like this being a team that is trying to win right now, he thinks they use the first pick on a player and then they maybe take a quarterback in a trade up to the late first round, or they take one in the second at 47 or something like that. That makes sense to me. But, and listen, I do think that's the reality. They do need to show progress and they do need to have a good year this year. But, if you subscribe to the fact that this is a rebuild and that, the quarterback, your franchise quarterback isn't in your building, then it's not crazy to take that quarterback in the first round. In fact, it would be malpractice to identify him and not take him because you're trying to protect your job for a year. Like, that's not the reason not to do that. Super Unknown says, what up, Pat? Happy Passover. Same to you, Super Unknown. Chris P says, would you rather have T. Higgins or Brandon Ayuk? Ayuk's a really, really tough player. I think he's a better all-around receiver player, but Higgins is a guy who, like, to me, those jump balls in the end zone, red zone, deep threat, stretch the field, great at jump balls, really attractive as like a guy that for a Giants team that doesn't get in the end zone. Like, it's just what they do. They don't get in the end zone. So I think T. Higgins would be a good fit for them, but both really good players. BBU jokes Darius Slayton for Brandon Ayuk, who says no. Stoudemire says, if the top 3 wide receivers are not there at 6, then we should trade back with Minnesota and draft Brock Bowers at 11, then get either the best available corner or wide receiver at 23. I see you out here, Stoudemire, trying to reinforce that roster. I don't hate what that would do to the depth chart, that's for sure. They'd still have a lot of questions about the quarterback position, though. And obviously, like I said, the Giants' actions to me haven't spoken in support of their current quarterback situation. Miz says, happy Passover to all. May the world find peace very soon. Appreciate that thought, Miz. Eric Garrison says, Giants should have been restructuring Andrew and Bobby O, like Pugh said, then trade up for May, offer second-round pick for T or Ayuk. Justin Pugh, love him, man. He's pushing the conversation too. BBU says Giants trade back with Denver and get 12, Surtain, and 2025 first and third for 6. I don't understand why they would trade Pat Surtain. I really don't. Deilla NYG says, definitely thanks for your time, Pat. I appreciate that, Deilla. Thanks for saying that, and thanks for being here. Fashok KB says, Drake May is a QB to take at 6, not to trade up for, only because he will not be ready to play this year. So why risk the future? Take the wide receiver that will be an instant impact. I can see that viewpoint. Let's see. Miz says, I would go to 5, play it safe, and grab May. That's what I think the Giants ultimately would love to happen. Is like, let's say it's May, okay? Listen, they could be running smoke screens, all this, whatever. But let's just hypothetically right now say it's Drake May. I do think what they would love to happen is just get into that 4 or 5 window where they can shoot up and get them, even if it's that QB tax. It's not to 3. It's not selling the whole darn farm for the guy, right? Hunter says, what player could we throw in that has value into a trade? Whew, that's a tough one, right? finishing that cab there. Thanks for being with me while I enjoyed that glass of textbook. Yeah, Hunter, that's a good question. I threw out, obviously, I'm not saying you want to trade Kayvon Thibodeau, but like he's probably the best example of a guy on your roster that you could get value out of, that a team would think he's an attractive young player that could develop into something. But that's obviously not the type of thing you want to steal from your pass rush, right? You don't want to steal from your pass rush. And also, he was Joe Shane's first draft pick, his defining pick, one of two picks that also included Evan Neal in the top 10 of a draft. So like that would, but you're right, Hunter, is like when you talk about trading a player off their roster, they don't really have a lot of players where you say, oh, a team would be desperate for that guy, right? Brett says, I missed it, Pat. I'm sure it was a great conversation as always. DJ's the man. Brett, no problem, man. Yeah, catch up when you can. Thanks so much. And when I wrap up here, I'll remind everybody what's coming next later this week. Miz says, can't wait for the Thursday holiday. Fasho says, rumors of the Vikings will trade 11 and 23 to the Chargers for Herbert, and Harbaugh will take JJ. Yeah, dare him to. Miz says, look, Jones is a good guy, class act, works hard, represents the organization. They didn't build around him, but it's just time to go fresh, young franchise QB. Yep, I agree. Brett says, I think Shane is going to trade down, too many needs with not enough picks. Jacob says, Pat, any shot we move back up in first? Keep in mind, Bowers didn't get a visit. You're saying any chance that the Giants trade down and then move back up, Jacob? I guess that's possible. Certainly Arizona did it last year. DeIlla says, Higgins' inability to stay on the field scares me. Ayuk is always on the field and ready to go. Fair point. Yeah, Ayuk, better all-around player. And you're right, availability matters. That's a good point. Take a QB at 6, wide receiver 47, or trade for a wide receiver, then go best player available rest of the draft, says Chris. I love it. Dope Dez says, please hit the like button. Thank you, Dope Dez, for saying that. Yes, please hit those like buttons. Thank you. Hirsch, what's going on, man? Good to see you. Jacob says, Pat, do you think they are more willing to flip next year's picks versus this year? We only have 6. I think, like, I've heard some people say that the later rounds of this year, not as much exciting players this year as maybe some others. So, do you try to package all those in a move up, right? Rather than just trading down, acquiring more assets late rounds this year. But the Giants also have so many holes on their roster. They really do need to add talent. So more kicks at the can is good. Yeah, I just personally think, Jacob, that like adding more this year, like this is about this year for the Giants. Yes, it's a rebuild. And yes, you want to look at it in terms of like patience for the future and long runway, and maybe even a quarterback that you're taking who doesn't have to play right away, right? But as far as like managing your assets, adding value, adding talent, I think you want to be focused on adding, not taking away too much from the talent you're adding in this draft this year to this team. D-Kid says, Pat, I don't understand at all the sentiment we should take a wide receiver over a potential franchise quarterback so that we can win next year. Yeah, no, I don't either, D-Kid. I don't either. I'm just saying I see the point that they need more talent on their roster to compete even at like an acceptable level, especially on offense, in order to like tread enough water that they're still the GM and coach next year, right? Like that part makes some sense to me. But no, like I don't personally think like you add a great wide receiver to this team tomorrow, it's going to help the team. Is it going to meaningfully change their win-loss record at the end of the year? I don't know that. I don't know that. Again, that's not because the player's not great that they get. It's because their team needs to be better. They have their full team. Right. Yeah. Not trading Tibbs, you said. Yeah, exactly. DeIlla says, who has legitimate trade value on this team? Probably Dex and Andrew. That's about it. Tibbs and Banks are on their way, but not quite there yet. It's fair. Hunter says, Woj just said the Sixers are filing a grievance because they feel screwed both games by the refs. That's wild. Let's see. Jacob says, draft at 6, then with the second, move back up. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think you could end up moving up from the second, either into the early second or late first for the quarterback if you don't go quarterback at the top. Miz says Dex is untouchable to me. R0B says, hey, Pat, just jumping in. What are you hearing thus far leading into Thursday? Any update on our interest in Ayuk? No Ayuk update from on the Giants there, though. They have been a team, obviously, in the receiver market, just poking around, whether it's draft, checking in on Mike Evans. So they're going to do their due diligence everywhere. They do need weapons, obviously. No update, though, on Ayuk. But he and Higgins are both names to watch on the wide receiver trade market. And then leading into Thursday, I believe it's QB until it's not. We'll see if they can actually get their QB. Is it Drake May? That's the way it seems like it's tracking. They also like McCarthy. Penix, the dark horse. Let's see. R0B claiming that the Giants are in talks for Brandon Ayuk. Interesting, R0B. R0B saying that the Giants, Patriots, and Commanders are all in on Ayuk for a second-round pick. R0B, we'll see if your sources pan out, man. Interesting. Nice little late add to the chat. I hadn't heard that. Let's see. Like we said, go to 5 to secure Drake May. Boom. Yep. Hirsch says this draft can make or break Shane and Dable. That's why they have to draft a QB now. I agree. Let's see. All right. For show KB says, is it true the Giants will be around 20 million in cap space after all the negative 20 million in cap space after all the contracts hit at training camp? Well, yeah, you have to account for the fact that the draft class always takes up a certain amount, KB, and so that's part of the reason why you end up with a situation where you have to build in some space leading into the draft, and if you don't, then that's where you end up having to, restructure some things down the road, which the Giants do have some of those options. But listen, guys, this has been an amazing chat. Really appreciate it. I'm going to take away 2 more here or 3 more. Chris says, I'll trade Daniel Jones, Tommy DeVito, and next year's 7th round pick for a medium Pepsi. I love the humor. Hunter says Vikings would be dumb not to trade up for a QB. Them not getting a QB is admitting they're fine losing Jefferson. Yep. I think when all is said and done, you're going to see them charging up for sure. RZRB says, Pat, I don't get fans that don't want to give up assets this year, but would be okay next year. When you don't know where you're drafting, the only difference is a wide receiver. Yeah, no, listen, this is going to be a fascinating draft. Really appreciate you guys being here as always. These Talkin Ball lives are getting better and better. Thank you so much for participating. Remember, super chats and super stickers when we do these, a good way to support the channel, and your comment gets elevated to the top of the chat. If not, hit those like buttons when we're live and subscribe to the channel on YouTube at PL on NFL, everywhere, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, on X or Twitter. I am P Leonard NYDN. That's where you can find a lot of my information, especially on draft night. But here's the plan, guys. The plan on Thursday is I'm going to do maybe like a 30-minute to an hour-long live chat a special episode Thursday around lunchtime or early afternoon, maybe noon or 1 o'clock Eastern. I'll advertise it on all of my social channels, and we will prime the pump for the draft that night. And then you can find me running on social media during the draft. And then after the Giants pick and after the first round, we'll find a way to go live to you guys after speaking to the Giants draft pick and to Joe Shane and Brian Daboll. Chris P says, thanks for the pod. Hunter says, thanks, Pat. Have a great night. Miz says, thank you. And DeIlla says, thanks, Pat. Take it easy. We appreciate you guys so much here on the Talkin Ball live with Pat Leonard channel and YouTube page. Remember, we are sponsored by BetOnline and also by Estate 98 Coffee. It's an Esencia de Cafe from El Salvador. Dates back to 1798. Thank you for all the contributions to this chat. Thank you for all the questions. Thanks for all the insight. And check me at the New York Daily News website and on social media throughout the week for potential breaking news, trades, everything I'm hearing and stories to lead up to one of the more fascinating and pivotal and critical drafts we've seen for the Giants in a while. Thank you so much. Take care.